Welcome back, dear friends, to the Crimson Academy's course on a tribute to His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha. Dear friends, we are picking back up on Hassan Baliuzi's immortal work, Abdu'l-Baha, the Center of the Covenant of Baha'u'llah. Dear friends, we are on Chapter 17, California, October 1st through October 26th. It was about midnight of October 1st, 1912, when Abdu'l-Baha reached San Francisco. A house at 1815 California Street had been rented for him. Because he had requested, there were not many to greet him at the terminus. But though the hour was late, many awaited his arrival at his San Francisco home. Among them, veterans of the faith, such as Mrs. Helen S. Goodall, her daughter Mrs. Cooper, and Mr. and Mrs. Ralston. Abdu'l-Baha delivered his first public address in California at a Unitarian church in San Francisco on October 6th, and the following day he spoke at the Japanese Independent Church in Oakland to the Japanese Young Men's Christian Association. He opened his talk with these words: "It is a great happiness to be here this evening, especially for the reason that the members of this association have come from the region of the Orient. For a long time I have entertained a desire to meet some of the Japanese friends. That nation has achieved extraordinary progress in a short space of time, a progress and development which have astonished the world. Inasmuch as they have advanced in material civilization, they must assuredly possess the capacity for spiritual development. For this reason, I have an excessive longing to meet them. Praise be to God. This pleasure is now afforded me, for here in this city I am face to face with a revered group of the Japanese. According to report, the people of the Japanese nation are not prejudiced. They investigate reality. Wherever they find truth, they prove to be its lovers. They are not attached tenaciously to blind imitations of ancient beliefs and dogmas. Therefore, it is my great desire to discourse with them upon a subject in order that the unity and blending together of the nations of the East and the nations of the West may be furthered and accomplished. In this way, religious, racial, and political prejudice, partisan bias, and sectarianism will be dispelled amongst men. Any kind of prejudice is destructive to the body politic." Then he spoke at length of the essential function of religion as the unifying power of the advent of the great educators of mankind, the manifestations of God, Moses, Buddha, Zoroaster, Christ, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah, of the oneness of their purpose and of their solid achievements, and brought his discourse to its end in this fashion: "And ye who are the people of the Orient which has ever been the dawning point of lights, from whence the sun of reality has ever shone forth, casting its effulgence upon the west, ye therefore must become the manifestations of lights. Ye must become brilliant lamps. Ye must shine as stars radiating the light of love toward all mankind. May you be the cause of love amongst the nations. Thus, may the world become witness that the Orient has ever been the dawning point of illumination, the source of love and reconciliation. Make peace with all the world. Love everybody. Serve everybody. All are the servants of God. God has created all. He provideth for all. He is kind to all. Therefore must we be kind to all. I am greatly pleased with this meeting. I am joyous and happy, for here in these western regions I find Orientals seeking education, and who are free from prejudice. May God assist you. This talk was translated from Persian into English, and from English into Japanese. On the day after Abdu'l-Baha's arrival at San Francisco, Dr. David Starr Jordan, president of Leland Stanford Junior University near Palo Alto, called to invite him to speak at his university. And on October 8th, an audience 2,000 strong, comprising students, teaching staff, administrators, as well as leading men and women of the vicinity, gathered to hear Abdu'l-Baha. It was a historic occasion for the Baha'i faith in California. Dr. David Starr Jordan said, Abdu'l-Baha will surely unite the East and the West, for he treads the mystic way with practical feet. The discourse which Abdu'l-Baha delivered that day was one of the greatest, most powerful of his ministry. The greatest attainment in the world of humanity has ever been scientific in nature. It is the discovery of the realities of things. Inasmuch as I find myself in the home of science. For this is one of the great universities of the country, and well known abroad, I feel a keen sense of joy. The highest praise is due to men who devote their energies to science. And the noblest center is a center wherein the sciences and arts are taught and studied. Science ever tends to the illumination of the world of humanity. It is the cause of eternal honor to man, and its sovereignty is far greater than the sovereignty of kings. The dominion of kings has an ending. The king himself may be dethroned, but the sovereignty of science is everlasting and without end. Consider the philosophers of former times. Their rule and dominion is still manifest in the world. The Greek and Roman kingdoms with all their grandeur passed away. The ancient sovereignties of the Orient are but memories, whereas the power and influence of Plato and Aristotle still continue. Kings have invaded countries and achieved conquest through the shedding of blood, but the scientist, through his beneficent achievements, invades the regions of ignorance, conquering the realm of minds and hearts. Therefore, his conquests are everlasting. May you attain extraordinary progress in this center of education. May you become radiant lights flooding the dark regions and recesses of ignorance with illumination. Inasmuch as the fundamental principle of the teaching of Baha'u'llah is the oneness of the world of humanity, I will speak to you upon the intrinsic oneness of all phenomena. This is one of the abstruse subjects of divine philosophy. Fundamentally, all existing things pass through the same degrees and phases of development, and any given phenomenon embodies all others. An ancient statement of the Arabian philosophers declares that all things are involved in all things. It is evident that each material organism is an aggregate expression of single and simple elements, and a given cellular element or atom has its coursings or journeyings through various and myriad stages of life. For example, we will say the cellular elements which have entered into the composition of a human organism were at one time a component part of the animal kingdom. At another time they entered into the composition of the vegetable, and prior to that existed in the kingdom of the mineral. They have been subject to transference from one condition of life to another, passing through various forms and phases, exercising in each existence special functions. Their journeyings through material phenomena are continuous. Therefore, each phenomenon is the expression in degree of all other phenomena. The difference is one of successive transferences, and the period of time involved in evolutionary process. For example, it has taken a certain length of time for this cellular element in my hand to pass through the various periods of metabolism. Later on, it will revert to its primordial elemental state in the mineral kingdom, being subject, as it were, to infinite journeyings from one degree of existence to another, passing through every stage of being and life. Whenever it appears in any distinct form or image, it has its opportunities, virtues, and functions. As each component, atom, or element in the physical organisms of existence is subject to transference through endless forms and stages, possessing virtues peculiar to those forms and stations, it is evident that all phenomena of material being are fundamentally one. As this is true of material phenomena, how much more evident and essential it is that oneness should characterize man in the realm of idealism, which finds its expression only in the human kingdom. Verily, the origin of all material life is one, and its termination likewise one. In view of this fundamental unity and agreement of all phenomenal life, why should man in his kingdom of existence wage war or indulge in hostility and destructive strife against his fellow man? Man is the noblest of the creatures. In his physical organism, he possesses the virtues of the mineral kingdom. Likewise, he embodies the virtue augmentative or power of growth which characterize the kingdom of the vegetable. Furthermore, in his degree of physical existence, He is qualified with functions and powers peculiar to the animal, beyond which lies the range of his distinctive human, mental, and spiritual endowment. Considering this wonderful unity of the kingdoms of existence and their embodiment in the highest and noblest creature, why should man be at variance and in conflict with man? Is it fitting and justifiable that he should be at war, when harmony and interdependence characterize the kingdoms of phenomenal life below him? The elements and lower organisms are synchronized in the great plan of life. Shall man infinitely above them in degree be antagonistic and a destroyer of that perfection? From the fellowship and commingling of the elemental atoms, life results. In their harmony and blending, there is ever newness of existence. Just now, the physical energies and natural forces which come under our immediate observation are all at peace. The sun is at peace with the earth upon which it shines. The soft breathing winds are at peace with the trees. All the elements are in harmony and equilibrium. A slight disturbance and discord among them might bring another San Francisco earthquake and fire. A physical clash, a little quarreling among the elements as it were, and a violent cataclysm of nature results. This happens in the mineral kingdom. Consider then the effect of discord and conflict in the kingdom of man, so superior to the realm of inanimate existence. How great the attendant catastrophe, especially when we realize that man is endowed by God with mind and intellect. Verily, mind is the supreme gift of God. Verily, intellect is the effulgence of God. This is manifest and self-evident. For all created things except man are subjects or captives of nature. They cannot deviate in the slightest degree from nature's law and control. The colossal sun center of our planetary system is nature's captive, incapable of the least variation from the law of command. All the orbs and luminaries in this illimitable universe are likewise obedient to nature's regulation. Our planet, the earth, acknowledges nature's omnipresent sovereignty. The kingdoms of the mineral, vegetable, and animal respond to nature's will and fiat of control. The great bulky elephant with its massive strength has no power to disobey the restrictions nature has laid upon him. But man, weak and diminutive in comparison, empowered by mind, which is an effulgence of divinity itself, can resist nature's control and apply natural laws to his own uses. The mind, has classified and adapted these laws to human needs and uses, this being contrary to the postulates of nature. For example, electricity was once a hidden or latent natural force. It would have remained hidden if the human intellect had not discovered it. Man has broken the law of its concealment, taken this energy out of the invisible treasury of the universe, and brought it into visibility. Is it not an extraordinary accomplishment that this little creature man has imprisoned an irresistible cosmic force in an incandescent lamp? All human discoveries were once secrets and mysteries sealed and stored up in the bosom of the material universe until the mind of man, which is the greatest of divine effulgences, penetrated them and made them subservient to his will and purpose. Notwithstanding this supreme bestowal of God, which is the greatest power in the world of creation, man continues to war and fight, killing his fellow man with the ferocity of a wild animal. Is this in keeping with his exalted station? If the animals are savage and ferocious, it is simply a means for their subsistence and preservation. They are deprived of that degree of intellect which can reason and discriminate between right and wrong, justice and injustice. They are justified in their actions and not responsible. When man is ferocious and cruel toward his fellow man, it is not for subsistence or safety. His motive is selfish advantage and willful wrong. It is neither seemly nor befitting that such a noble creature, endowed with intellect and lofty thoughts, capable of wonderful achievements and discoveries in sciences and arts, potential with ever higher perceptions, and the accomplishment of divine purposes in life, should seek the blood of his fellow men upon the field of battle. God has created man lofty and noble, made him a dominant factor in creation. He has specialized man with supreme bestowals, conferred upon him mind, perception, memory, abstraction, and the powers of the senses. These gifts of God to man were intended to make him the manifestation of divine virtues, a radiant light in the world of creation, a source of life and the agency of constructiveness in the infinite fields of existence. In nature there is the law of the survival of the fittest. Even if man be not educated, then according to the natural institutes, this natural law will demand of man supremacy. The purpose and object of schools, colleges, and universities is to educate man and thereby rescue and redeem him from the exigencies and defects of nature, and to awaken within him the capability of controlling and appropriating nature's bounties. It is not intended that the world of humanity should be left to its natural state. It is in need of the education divinely provided for it. The holy heavenly manifestations of God have been the teachers. They are the divine gardeners who transform the jungles of human nature into fruitful orchards, and make the thorny places blossom as the rose. It is evident then that the intended and especial function of man is to rescue and redeem himself from the inherent defects of nature, and become qualified with the ideal virtues of divinity. Shall he sacrifice these ideal virtues and destroy these possibilities of advancement? God has endowed him with a power whereby he can even overcome the laws and phenomena of nature, wrest the sword from nature's hand, and use it against nature itself. Shall he then remain its captive, even failing to qualify under the natural law which commands the survival of the fittest? That is to say, shall he continue to live upon the level of the animal kingdom, without distinction between them, and himself in natural impulses and ferocious instincts? Praise be to God, I find myself in an assemblage the members of which are peace-loving and advocates of international unity. The thoughts of all present are centered upon the oneness of the world of mankind, and every ambition is to render service in the cause of human uplift and betterment. I supplicate God that He may confirm and assist you, that each one of you may become a professor emeritus in the world of scientific knowledge, a faithful standard bearer of peace and bonds of agreement between the hearts of men. 50 years ago, Baha'u'llah declared the necessity of peace among the nations and the reality of reconciliation between the religions of the world. He announced that the fundamental basis of all religion is one, that the essence of religion is human fellowship, and that the differences in belief which exist are due to dogmatic interpretation and blind imitations, which are at variance with the foundations established by the prophets of God. He proclaimed that if the reality underlying religious teaching be investigated, all religions would be unified, and the purpose of God, which is love, and the blending of human hearts, would be accomplished. According to his teachings, if religious belief proves to be the cause of discord and dissension, its absence would be preferable, for religion was intended to be the divine remedy and panacea for the ailments of humanity, the healing balm for the wounds of mankind. If its misapprehension and defilement have brought about warfare and bloodshed instead of remedy and cure, the world would be better under irreligious conditions. Baha'u'llah especially emphasized international peace. From every real standpoint, there must and should be peace among all nations. God created one earth and one mankind to people it. Man has no other habitation, but man himself has come forth and proclaimed imaginary boundary lines and territorial restrictions, naming them Germany, France, Russia, etc., and torrents of precious blood are spilled in defense of these imaginary divisions of our one human habitation, under the delusion of a fancied and limited patriotism. After all, a claim and title to territory or native land is but a claim and attachment to the dust of earth. We live upon this earth for a few days and then rest beneath it forever. So it is our graveyard eternally. Shall man fight for the tomb which devours him, for his eternal sepulchre? It is my hope that you who are students in this university may never be called upon to fight for the dust of earth, which is the tomb and sepulchre of all mankind, but that during the days of your life you may enjoy the most perfect companionship one with another, even as one family, as brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers associating together in peace and true fellowship. When Abdu'l-Baha had finished speaking, Dr. Jordan asked the audience to stand to show its appreciation. The applause and expressions of enthusiasm which followed were truly striking. Abdu'l-Baha had luncheon with the president, spent the rest of the day in Palo Alto, and spoke in the evening at its Unitarian church. His next major talk was delivered on October 10th to the Open Forum in San Francisco. This was a gathering of agnostics and free thinkers. Abdu'l-Baha told them, "Although I was feeling indisposed this evening, yet, owing to the love I entertain for you, I have attended this meeting. For I have heard that this is an open forum, investigating reality, that you are free from blind imitations, desiring to arrive at the truth of things, and that your endeavors are lofty. Therefore, I have thought it expedient to discourse upon the subject of philosophy, which is alike interesting to the East and the West, enabling us to consider the analogies and differences between the philosophical teachings of the Orient and Occident." First, he demonstrated the unreliability of sense perception. Among the senses, the most powerful and reliable is that of sight. This sense views a mirage as a body of water, and is positive as to its character, whereas a mirage is non-existent. The sense of vision or sight sees reflected images in a mirror as verities, when reason declares them to be non-existent. The eye sees the sun and planets revolving around the earth, whereas in reality the sun is stationary, central, and the earth revolves upon its own axis. The sense of sight sees the earth as a plane, whereas the faculty of reason discovers it to be spherical. The sense of sight beholds a whirling spark of fire as a circle of light, and is without doubt as to it, whereas such a circle is non-existent. Briefly, there are many instances and evidences which disprove the assertion that tangibilities and sense impressions are certainties, for the senses are misleading and often mistaken. Next, he rejected the theory that man had his origin in the animal kingdom. Man is distinguished above the animals through his reason. The perceptions of man are of two kinds, tangible or sensible and reasonable, whereas the animal perceptions are limited to the senses, the tangible only. The tangible perceptions may be likened to this candle, the reasonable perceptions to the light. Calculations of mathematical problems and determining the spherical form of the earth are through the reasonable perceptions. The center of gravity is a hypothesis of reason. Reason itself is not tangible, perceptible to the senses. Reason is an intellectual verity or reality. All qualities are ideal realities, not tangible realities. For instance, we say this man is a scholarly man. Knowledge is an ideal attainment, not perceptible to the senses. As to the animal, it is minus the perception reasonable. It cannot apprehend ideal realities. The intelligence of an animal located in Europe could never have planned the discovery of the continent of America. The animal cannot penetrate the secrets of Genesis and creation. Beyond the tangibilities and impressions of the senses, it cannot accept anything. Man, Abdu'l-Baha asserted, was not descended from the animal kingdom. Man had always been potentially man, no matter what forms he had assumed in his previous stages of existence. This anatomical evolution or progression does not alter or affect the statement that the development of man was always human in type. The human embryo, when examined microscopically, is at first a mere germ or worm. Gradually, as it develops, it shows certain divisions, rudiments of hands and feet appear. Afterward, it undergoes certain distinct changes until it reaches its actual human form and is born into this world. But at all times, even when the embryo resembled a worm, it was human in potentiality and character, not animal. The forms assumed by the human embryo in its successive changes do not prove that it is animal in its essential character. Realizing this, we may acknowledge the fact that at one time man was an inmate of the sea, at another period an invertebrate, then a vertebrate, and finally a human being standing erect. Though we admit these changes, we cannot say man is an animal. The animal, Abdu'l-Baha stressed, is a captive of nature, and man is not. Man can master nature, the animal cannot. Furthermore, it is evident that in the world of nature, conscious knowledge is absent. Nature is minus knowing, whereas man is conscious. Nature is devoid of memory, man possesses memory. Nature is minus perception and volition. Man possesses both. It is evident that virtues are inherent in man which are not present in the world of nature. This is provable from every standpoint. If it be claimed that the intellectual reality of man belongs to the world of nature, that it is a part of the whole, we ask, is it possible for the part to contain virtues which the whole does not possess? For instance, is it possible for the drop to contain virtues of which the aggregate body of the sea is deprived? Is it possible that the extraordinary faculty of reason in man is animal in character and quality? On the other hand, it is evident and true, though most astounding, that in man there is present this supernatural force or faculty which discovers the realities of things and which possesses the power of idealization or intellection. It is capable of discovering scientific laws, and science, we know, is not a tangible reality. Science exists in the mind of man as an ideal reality. The mind itself, reason itself, is an ideal reality and not tangible. Notwithstanding this, some of the sagacious men declare we have attained to the superlative degree of knowledge. We have penetrated the laboratory of nature, studying sciences and arts. We have attained the highest station of knowledge in the human world. We have investigated the facts as they are and have arrived at the conclusion that nothing is rightly acceptable except the tangible, which alone is a reality worthy of credence. All that is not tangible is imagination and nonsense. Strange indeed that after 20 years training in colleges and universities, man should reach such a station wherein he will deny the existence of the ideal or that which is not perceptible to the senses. Have you ever stopped to think that the animal already has graduated from such a university? Have you ever realized that the cow is already a professor emeritus of that university? For the cow, without hard labor and study, is already a philosopher of the superlative degree in the school of nature. The cow denies everything that is not tangible, saying, I can see, I can eat, I believe only in that which is tangible. Then why should we go to the colleges? Let us go to the cow. Only 2 days after this remarkable meeting with 3 free thinkers and agnostics, Abdu'l-Baha delivered on October 12th at Temple Emmanuel to a Jewish congregation of some 2,000 people, many of whom were eminent to the Jewish community, the talk which was the towering climax to his matchless and strenuous work in the American continent. This is how he began. The greatest bestowal of God in the world of humanity is religion. For assuredly the divine teachings of religion are above all other sources of instruction and development to man. We will therefore investigate religion, seeking from an unprejudiced standpoint to discover whether it is the source of illumination, the cause of development, and the animating impulse of all human advancement. We will investigate independently, free from the restrictions of dogmatic beliefs, blind imitations of ancestral forms, and the influence of mere human opinion. For as we enter this question, we will find some who declare that religion is a cause of uplift and betterment in the world, while others assert just as positively that it is a detriment and a source of degradation to mankind. We must give these questions thorough and impartial consideration, so that no doubt or uncertainty may linger in our minds regarding them. How shall we determine whether religion has been the cause of human advancement or retrogression? We will first consider the founders of the religions, the prophets, review the story of their lives, compare the conditions preceding their appearance with those subsequent to their departure, following historical records and irrefutable facts instead of relying upon traditionary statements which are open to both acceptance and denial. After mention of Abraham and the covenant that God made with him, Abdu'l-Baha turned to consider the achievements of Moses. The children of Israel were in bondage and captivity in the land of Egypt 400 years. They were in an extreme state of degradation and slavery under the tyranny and oppression of the Egyptians. While they were in the condition of abject poverty, in the lowest degree of abasement, ignorance, and servility, Moses suddenly appeared among them. Although he was but a shepherd, such majesty, grandeur, and efficiency became manifest in him through the power of religion that his influence continues to this day. His prophethood was established throughout the land, and the law of his word became the foundation of the laws of the nations. This unique personage, single and alone, rescued the children of Israel from bondage through the power of religious training and discipline. He led them to the Holy Land and founded there a great civilization which has become permanent and renowned, and under which these people attained the highest degree of honor and glory. He freed them from bondage and captivity. He imbued them with qualities of progressiveness and capability. They proved to be a civilizing people with instincts toward education and scholastic attainment. Their philosophy became renowned. Their industries were celebrated throughout the nations. In all lines of advancement which characterize a progressive people, they achieved distinction. In the splendor of the reign of Solomon, their sciences and arts advanced to such a degree that even the Greek philosophers journeyed to Jerusalem to sit at the feet of the Hebrew sages and acquire the basis of Israelitish law according to Eastern history. This is an established fact. Even Socrates visited the Jewish doctors in the Holy Land, consorting with them and discussing the principles and basis of their religious belief. After his return to Greece, he formulated his philosophical teaching of divine unity and advanced his belief in the immortality of the spirit beyond the dissolution of the body. Without doubt, Socrates absorbed these verities from the wise men of the Jews with whom he came in contact. Hippocrates and other philosophers of the Greeks likewise visited Palestine and acquired wisdom from the Jewish prophets, studying the basis of ethics and morality, returning to their country with contributions which have made Greece famous. When a movement fundamentally religious makes a weak nation strong, changes a nondescript tribal people into a mighty and powerful civilization, rescues them from captivity, and elevates them to sovereignty, transforms their ignorance into knowledge, and endows them with an impetus of advancement in all degrees of development. This is not theory but historical fact. It becomes evident that religion is the cause of man's attainment to honor and sublimity. But when we speak of religion, we mean the essential foundation or reality of religion, not the dogmas and blind imitations which have gradually encrusted it, and which are the cause of the decline and effacement of a nation. These are inevitably destructive and a menace and hindrance to a nation's life, even as it is recorded in the Torah and confirmed in history that when the Jews became fettered by empty forms and imitations, the wrath of God became manifest. Next, Abdu'l-Baha traced the history of the Babylonian captivity and later the Roman domination of the Jewish nation, and continued thus. From this review of the history of the Jewish people, we learn that the foundation of the religion of God laid by Moses was the cause of their eternal honor and national prestige, the animating impulse of their advancement and racial supremacy, and the source of that excellence which will always command the respect and reverence of those who understand their peculiar destiny and outcome. The dogmas and blind imitations which gradually obscured the reality of the religion of God proved to be Israel's destructive influences, causing the expulsion of these chosen people from the Holy Land of their covenant and promise. The divine mission and station of Moses stand unassailable, Abdu'l-Baha asserted. And he went on to say, "We should earnestly seek and thoroughly investigate realities, recognizing that the purpose of the religion of God is the education of humanity and the unity and fellowship of mankind. Furthermore, we will establish the point that the foundations of the religions of God are one foundation. This foundation is not multiple, for it is reality itself. Reality does not admit of multiplicity, although each of the divine religions is separable into two divisions. He developed this theme in detail, citing many instances of these divisions of what is changeable and what is unchangeable in religion. The essential fundamental teachings of the manifestations of God, he explained, are related to absolutes and are thus immutable. The advancement of man is ever their purpose. But the secondary teachings, which are related to the conditions of the time, must be subject to change, since both man and his societies evolve. Abdu'l-Baha had prepared the way for the central and challenging theme of his exposition, which he now unfolded to the congregation of Temple Emmanuel. Christ ratified and proclaimed the foundation of the law of Moses. Muhammad and all the prophets have revoiced that same foundation of reality. Therefore, the purposes and accomplishments of the divine messengers have been one and the same. They were the source of advancement to the body politic and the cause of the honor and divine civilization of humanity, the foundation of which is one and the same in every dispensation. It is evident then that the proofs of the validity and inspiration of a prophet of God are the deeds of beneficent accomplishment and greatness emanating from him. If he proves to be instrumental in the elevation and betterment of mankind, he is undoubtedly a valid and heavenly messenger. I wish you to be reasonable and just in your consideration of the following statements. At the time when the Israelites had been dispersed by the power of the Roman Empire, and the national life of the Hebrew people had been effaced by their conquerors, when the law of God had seemingly passed from them, and the foundation of the religion of God was apparently destroyed, Jesus Christ appeared. When he arose among the Jews, the first thing he did was to proclaim the validity of the manifestation of Moses. He declared that the Torah, the Old Testament, was the book of God, and that all the prophets of Israel were valid and true. He extolled the mission of Moses, and through his proclamation the name of Moses was spread throughout the world. Through Christianity, the greatness of Moses became known among all nations. Through the instrumentality of Christ, through the translation of the New Testament, the little volume of the Gospel, the Old Testament, the Torah, has been translated into 600 languages and spread everywhere in the world. The names of the Hebrew prophets became household words among the nations, who believed that the children of Israel were verily the chosen people of God, a holy nation under the especial blessing and protection of God, and that therefore the prophets who had arisen in Israel were the daysprings of revelation and brilliant stars in the heaven of the will of God. Therefore Christ, really promulgated Judaism, for he was a Jew and not opposed to the Jews. That portion of the ordinances of Moses which concerned transactions and transient conditions underwent transformation, but the essential teachings of Moses were revoiced and confirmed by Christ without change. Likewise, through the supreme efficacy and power of the Word of God, he united most of the nations of the East and the West. He led them beneath the overshadowing tent of the oneness of humanity. He educated them until they became united and agreed, and through his spirit of conciliation, the Roman, Greek, Chaldean, and Egyptian were blended in a composite civilization. This wonderful power and extraordinary efficacy of the Word prove conclusively the validity of Christ. Consider how his heavenly sovereignty is still permanent and lasting. Verily, this is conclusive proof and manifest evidence. From another horizon we see Muhammad, the prophet of Arabia, appearing. You may not know that the first address of Muhammad to his tribe was this statement: Verily, Moses was a prophet of God, and the Torah is a book of God. Verily, O ye people, ye must believe in the Torah, in Moses, and the prophets. Ye must accept all the prophets of Israel as valid. In the Quran, there are 7 statements or repetitions of the Mosaic narrative, and in all the historic accounts, Moses is praised. Muhammad announced that Moses was a great prophet of God, that God guided him in the wilderness of Sinai, that through the light of guidance, Moses hearkened to the summons of God, that he was the interlocutor of God, and the bearer of the tablet of the 10 Commandments. Consider that Muhammad was born among the savage and barbarous tribes of Arabia, lived among them, and was outwardly illiterate and uninformed of the holy books of God. The Arabian people were in the utmost ignorance and barbarism. They buried their infant daughters alive, considering this to be an evidence of a valorous and lofty nature. They lived in bondage and serfdom under the Persian and Roman governments, and were scattered throughout the desert, engaged in continual strife and bloodshed. When the light of Muhammad dawned, the darkness of ignorance was dispelled from the deserts of Arabia. In a short period of time, those barbarous peoples attained a superlative degree of civilization, which with Baghdad as its center extended as far westward as Spain, and afterward influenced the greater part of Europe. What proof of prophethood could be greater than this, unless we close our eyes to justice and remain obstinately opposed to reason? Today the Christians are believers in Moses, accept him as a prophet of God, and praise him most highly. The Muslims are likewise believers in Moses, accept the validity of his prophethood. Could it be said that the acceptance of Moses by the Christians and Muslims has been harmful and detrimental to those people? On the contrary, it has been beneficial to them, proving that they have been fair-minded and just. What harm could result to the Jewish people then, if they in return should accept Christ and acknowledge the validity of the prophethood of Muhammad? By this acceptance and praiseworthy attitude, the enmity and hatred which have afflicted mankind so many centuries would be dispelled, fanaticism and bloodshed pass away. Christians and Muslims believe and admit that Moses was the interlocutor of God. What harm is there in this, that the Jewish people should say that Christ was the Spirit of God and Muhammad the messenger of God? Then there will be no more hatred and fanaticism, no more warfare and bloodshed. Verily, I now declare to you that Moses was the interlocutor of God, a manifestation of God, that Moses revealed the fundamental law of God, that he laid the basis for the civilization and progress of the world of man. What harm is there in this? Have I lost anything by saying this to you and believing it as a Baha'i? On the contrary, it benefits me, and Baha'u'llah confirms me, saying, you have been fair and just in your judgment. You have impartially investigated the truth and arrived at a true conclusion. You have announced your belief in Moses, a prophet of God, and accepted the Torah, the book of God. Why not put an end to this religious strife and establish a bond of connection between the hearts of men? Why should not the followers of one religion praise the founder or teacher of another? You would lose nothing by such action and statement. On the contrary, you would contribute to the welfare of mankind. You would be instrumental in establishing the happiness of the world of humanity. Inasmuch as our God is one God and the Creator of all mankind, He provides for and protects all. We acknowledge Him as a God of kindness, justice, and mercy. Why then should we, His children and followers, war and fight, bringing sorrow and grief into the hearts of each other? Praise be to God, this century of radiance has dawned, this century wherein the reality of things is becoming evident, wherein science is penetrating the mysteries of the universe, and the oneness of the world of humanity is being established. Shall we remain steeped in our fanaticisms and cling to our prejudices? Is it fitting that we should still be bound and restricted by ancient fables and superstitions of the past, be handicapped by superannuated beliefs and the ignorances of dark ages, shunning and anathematizing each other? Is this becoming? Is it not better for us to be loving and considerate towards each other? Is it not preferable to enjoy fellowship and unity, join in anthems of praise to the Most High God, and extol all His prophets in the spirit of acceptance and true vision? Then indeed this world will become a paradise, and the promised day of God will dawn. Then, according to the prophecy of Isaiah, The wolf and the lamb will drink from the same stream. The lion and the calf pasture in the same meadow. What does this mean? It means that fierce and contending religions, hostile creeds, and divergent beliefs will reconcile and associate, notwithstanding their former hatreds and antagonism. This is the spirit and meaning of Isaiah's words. There will never be a day when this prophecy will come to pass literally, for these animals by their natures cannot mingle and associate in kindness and love. Therefore this prophecy symbolizes the unity and agreement of races, nations, and peoples who will come together in attitudes of intelligence, illumination, and spirituality. The age has dawned when human fellowship will become a reality. This century has come when all religions shall be unified. The dispensation is at hand when all nations shall enjoy the blessings of international peace. The cycle has arrived when racial prejudice will be abandoned by tribes and peoples of the world. The epoch has begun wherein all nativities will be conjoined in one great human family. For all mankind shall dwell in peace and security beneath the shelter of the great tabernacle of the one living God. In the evening, at the meeting in the home of Mrs. Goodall, Abdu'l-Baha remarked that never before had anyone spoken in a synagogue to affirm that Christ was the Word of God and Muhammad the Messenger of God. And noteworthy it was that no dissent was incurred. All that he said was only due to the confirmations of Baha'u'llah. Mrs. Hurst, who had led the first party of American pilgrims to the Holy Land, was estranged from the faith, but she was still sufficiently attached to come in person and invite Abdu'l-Baha and his attendants to spend a long weekend at her palatial home in the vicinity of Pleasanton. Because her invitation was sincere, Abdu'l-Baha accepted it. As was customary for a woman of Mrs. Hurst's standing, she had arranged a large house party that weekend, composed of the elite of Californian society. Mrs. Hurst herself went to San Francisco on October 13th to escort Abdu'l-Baha to her home. During the 3 days as her guest, he made no direct reference to the faith, until she herself requested it while recalling her pilgrimage. Mrs. Hurst recollected also the effect that the chanting of an Arabic prayer had had on her all those years ago in Akka, and expressed her ardent desire to hear such a prayer once again. Abdu'l-Baha's voice rang out powerfully as he acceded to her wish and chanted a prayer in Arabic. The other guests sat spellbound, although they were not familiar with the language. The second day, at the luncheon table, when asked to say a benediction, he uttered this prayer: He is God. Behold us, O Lord, gathered at this board, thankful for thy bounty, our gaze turned to thy kingdom. O Lord, send down unto us thy heavenly food and blessing from thee. Verily thou art the generous, and verily thou art the beneficent, the merciful. And at dinner on the 15th, he spoke this prayer. He is God, O Lord. How shall we thank thee? Thy bounties are limitless, and our gratitude but limited. How can the limited render thanks to the limitless? Incapable are we of offering thanks for thy mercies. Utterly powerless, we turn unto thy kingdom and beg thee to increase thy bestowal and bounty. Thou art the giver, thou art the bestower, thou art the powerful. Before departing for San Francisco on the 16th, Abdu'l-Baha asked to see all those who served in Mrs. Hurst's household, maids, pages, groom, cook. He spoke to them affectionately. He stood as a father to them. He said and wished them to have a memento of his visit. To each he gave 2 guineas. Then Mrs. Hurst escorted Abdu'l-Baha back to San Francisco. On the way, he warned her not to consider anyone a true Baha'i who was covetous of the goods of others and who tried to extort money from them. Mrs. Hurst's estrangement had, in fact, originated in such acts on the part of 1 or 2 individuals, she herself being the victim. Baha'is of Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, felt dejected and deprived because Abdu'l-Baha had not contemplated traveling northwards to their cities. Abdu'l-Baha himself was greatly saddened by this, and said that he could not bear to have anyone hurt or disappointed. Nevertheless, these cities were too distant, time was getting short, and he had to go south to Los Angeles to visit the grave of Thornton Chase. At this time, Europe's peace was in jeopardy because of the partial attitudes of the great powers towards Turkey, which had been plunged into war and defeat by the action of the Balkan states. Abdu'l-Baha explained that the plight of Turkey called for his early return to the Holy Land. So Baha'is of those northern cities came south and attained his presence in San Francisco. Abdu'l-Baha visited Oakland on several occasions. On October 16th, a feast was held there at the home of Mrs. Goodall and Mrs. Cooper. Despite the journey from Mrs. Hurst's home and his attendance that afternoon at the San Francisco Club to address its members, Abdu'l-Baha traveled in the evening to Oakland to be with the Baha'is at the feast. He spoke to them twice. That night he stayed in Oakland, returning to San Francisco the next day. It was then found that his signet ring was missing. Henceforth, he appended his signature to every tablet he dictated or wrote. Abdu'l-Baha's journey to Los Angeles on 18th October was for the specific purpose of visiting the grave of Thornton Chase. Although he spoke to groups of people in the hotel and met the press, he once again had to decline invitations to address societies and churches, as time would not allow it. The cemetery was located outside the city. Abdu'l-Baha took a tramcar. Alighting, he walked very quietly into the cemetery until he approached the grave of Thornton Chase, when he remarked on the beauty of the surroundings. Then, leaning against a tree, he stood silently before that resting place of the first Baha'i of the Christian West. He asked for some flowers, and with great care and loving attention, he arranged them on the grave. Then, still facing the grave, he turned in the direction of Akka and chanted the tablet of visitation, the tablet which is read in the shrines of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Following that, he chanted a prayer for Thornton Chase and spoke of the services which that dedicated man had rendered to the faith. Abdu'l-Baha had named him Sabet, the steadfast, in his lifetime. At the conclusion of his visit, Abdu'l-Baha knelt on the ground and kissed the grave of Thornton Chase. When he arrived back at the hotel in Los Angeles, a throng of people were awaiting him. That night, October 18th, he was so exhausted that he could not eat. And yet the next day he had to meet a great number of Baha'is and others. A journalist who had written about Mirza Shu'ullah, the son of Mirza Muhammad Ali, and had quoted him in his paper, insisted on questioning Abdu'l-Baha about Shu'ullah's relationship to him. Mirza Shu'ullah was then living in California and had given out that he was the grandson of Baha'u'llah and entitled to special consideration. To this persistent journalist, Abdu'l-Baha replied sternly that he would give him just one answer, after which the journalist should ask no more, and he would reply no more. That answer, Abdu'l-Baha said, was exactly what Christ had uttered when told that his brothers had come to see him. My brethren are these which hear the word of God and do it. Nevertheless, Abdu'l-Baha added, his doors were open to anyone who wished to come. Saying farewell to the Baha'is of Los Angeles, Abdu'l-Baha told them that future years would reveal the stature of Thornton Chase, and that they should visit his grave every year on his behalf. The journey back to San Francisco on October 21st was by night. Although Mrs. Goodall had reserved sleeping berths for all, Abdu'l-Baha's mind was so occupied that he could not sleep. On October 23rd, he made a final visit to Oakland, and on the 25th took leave of his friends in San Francisco. That morning, as Abdu'l-Baha came down the stairs, a great gathering of Baha'is who were about to see the last of their master raised their voices in a crescendo of Allahu Akbar, God is the most glorious. Abdu'l-Baha was deeply touched, and his face reflected his emotion. He walked amidst them, greeted each one, gave each one a attar of roses and told them, "Here I want to bid you farewell. This meeting and assemblage are very moving. This is the last cup. How thankful we must be to the Blessed Perfection that He has brought the hearts so near to each other. This attar that I give you is but a token of the fragrances of the Abha paradise, the best of all fragrances. I am very sad to be separated from you, and I do not know how to express it. It is not possible to give tongue to the feelings of the heart. I am greatly moved because I saw the love of Baha'u'llah in you. I witnessed the light of Baha'u'llah in your beings. I am so moved that I cannot speak. I leave it to your hearts to feel what I feel. Although I am going away from you, you have your place in my heart. When I reach the shrine of Baha'u'llah, I shall lay my head on the sacred threshold and beseech confirmation for each one of the friends. These days of our meeting were blissful days. They cannot be bettered. I met you every day, and I always found the hearts attracted, the eyes turned unto the Abha kingdom. There cannot be better days. Do you not forget them, and I shall not. I beg of God that the results of this amity shall become evident, that it shall lead to spirituality in the world, to impart guidance to all who dwell on this earth. I hope for such results from this gathering, that it will not be like other gatherings of people who forget each other as soon as they disperse. It is certain that because this gathering has been a divine assemblage, it will never be forgotten, and whenever recollected, it will produce fresh delight. This is my wish. Abdu'l-Baha had yet one more city to visit in the West, the capital of California. At the station in Sacramento, an automobile was waiting to take him to luncheon. His hostess desired him to stay in her home, but he did not feel able to accept and went to the hotel Sacramento, where a meeting had been arranged for that night. Abdu'l-Baha's talk that evening in the assembly hall of the hotel was on the history and background of the faith and its basic principles. The interest shown was so intense that another meeting in the same hall was announced for the following morning. At this second meeting, Abdu'l-Baha said, "I have visited your capital and its gardens. No other capital has such beautiful surroundings. Just as it is imposing and distinguished above all others, so may the people of California become the most exalted and perfect altruists of the world. California is indeed a blessed country. The climate is temperate, the sun ever shining, the fruits abundant and delicious. All outer blessings are evident here. The Californians are a noble people. Therefore, I hope they may make extraordinary progress and become renowned for their virtues. The issue of paramount importance in the world today is international peace. The European continent is like an arsenal, a storehouse of explosives ready for ignition, and one spark will set the whole of Europe aflame, particularly at this time when the Balkan question is before the world. Even now, war is raging furiously in some places. Therefore, the greatest need in the world today is international peace. It is time for the abolition of warfare, the unification of nations and governments. It is time for cementing together the East and the West. Inasmuch as the Californians seem peace-loving and possessed of great worthiness and capacity, I hope that advocates of peace may daily increase among them until the whole population shall stand for that beneficent outcome. May the men of affairs in this democracy uphold the standard of international conciliation. Then may altruistic aims and thoughts radiate from this center toward all other regions of the earth, and may the glory of this accomplishment forever halo the history of this country. May the first flag of international peace be upraised in this state. May this center and capital become distinguished in all degrees of accomplishment for the virtues of humanity, and the possibilities of human advancement are boundless. There is no end to them, and whatever be the degree to which humanity may attain, there are always degrees beyond. There is no attainment in the contingent realm of which it may be said, beyond this state of being and perfection there is no other, or this has achieved the superlative degree. No matter how perfect it may appear, there is always a greater degree of attainment to be reached. Therefore, no matter how much humanity may advance, there are ever higher stations to be attained, because virtues are unlimited. Finally, to conclude his talk, Abdu'l-Baha said, "Verily, the century of radiance has dawned. The minds are advancing, perceptions are broadening, realizations of human possibilities are becoming universal, susceptibilities are developing, the discovery of realities is progressing. Therefore, it is necessary that we should cast aside all the prejudices of ignorance, discard superannuated beliefs in traditions of past ages, and raise aloft the banner of international agreement. Let us cooperate in love, and through spiritual reciprocity enjoy eternal happiness and peace." After luncheon with the Baha'is of Sacramento, within a few hours, Abdu'l-Baha was on the train bound for Denver. Before we close the account of Abdu'l-Baha's visit to California, mention ought to be made of the newspaper, the Palo Alton, and H.W. Simpkins, one of its editors. Mr. Simpkins devoted a whole issue of his paper, Volume 10, Number 43, to the work and message of Abdu'l-Baha. The facsimile of a tablet dated October 17th, addressed to Mr. Simpkins, together with its translation, was printed in the same issue. It reads, "At the time I met you and felt the susceptibilities of your conscience, my heart and soul became greatly attached to that dear friend, and the utmost love was produced, and the spiritual emotions were obtained. Your visit gave me the utmost happiness. The address delivered in Stanford University and published completely in your paper was observed today, and on account of it I became both pleased and grateful. In order to express my pleasure and appreciation for this service of yours, I am writing you this epistle. I shall never forget your cordiality, and as long as life lasts, I shall remember you. I beg of God that dear friend may become like unto a shining star in the horizon of reality, and become the cause of bestowing spiritual life upon the world of humanity. The address delivered at the Jewish temple, establishing the validity of Jesus Christ and inviting the Jews to believe in him, is enclosed herein. From its powerful contents, you will realize that there were many conservative Jews in the audience. Yet in the most dauntless manner, the validity of Christ was proven. After reading its contents, should you think it best, you may print it fully, without abbreviation, in the columns of your paper, that others of the Jews may read it. Perchance this may prove an impetus for their respect for and belief in Christ. That this strife and contention that has lasted between the two nations for 2,000 years may disappear, and the oneness of the world of humanity may be unveiled. Upon thee be greeting and praise.